how does that give you any closure, or what does that do for you to see that? Because I can imagine it can be very conflicting.
So this is where everything stands right now, and it's moving fast, almost too fast to keep up. Sean Combs is locked up in federal prison, serving a 50-month sentence. But according to multiple insider reports, he's not just sitting quietly. Behind the scenes, he's allegedly trying to cut a deal, offering up information to the FBI to shorten his time, but not about the charges he was actually convicted for. Now here's where it gets wild. The reports claim this situation connects back to the case involving Shakur, and the names being mentioned are huge: Snoop Dogg and Suge Knight. You've got a convicted felon supposedly trying to trade stories for freedom, pointing fingers at some of the biggest figures in hip-hop over something that happened nearly 30 years ago. But this is the part that really makes you pause. If Combs actually has details about Shakur's situation that are valuable enough to bargain with, then how did he even get that kind of information in the first place? That doesn't just happen by accident. Either he knows something he was never supposed to know, or he's saying whatever it takes to get out of prison. And right now, the most shocking part is this: the FBI is reportedly taking him seriously. Let me break this down so you can see what's actually confirmed versus what people are quietly talking about behind closed doors. The official part comes first. Combs was convicted in July 2025 on 2 counts under the Mann Act. He avoided the most serious charges, but the conviction still hit, and he ended up with a 50-month sentence. Right now, he's being held at Fort Dix while his legal team works overtime on an appeal. Now here's where things start getting strange. His lawyers are pushing the argument that the so-called freak-offs were actually planned, filmed, and meant for private viewing.
Yeah, because I don't champion putting young black men in jail. Black men in jail.
Right.
Jail, period. That ain't, but
basically claiming it all falls under First Amendment protection. That alone could shake things up in a big way if the court even entertains it. But then there's the side you don't hear in official statements. The talk in legal circles is that Combs might be cooperating with federal investigators. And this isn't about his own case. It's reportedly about Snoop Dogg and Suge Knight tied to the Shakur situation. That's the twist. The focus isn't on Combs right now. It's on what he's saying about them, and investigators are said to be paying close attention. Take a second and really think about how uneven this situation sounds. A man sitting behind bars suddenly gets to play informant, flipping the script in a major way. This is someone who built an empire, hosted the biggest parties, and stood right in the middle of the East Coast and West Coast tension for years. And now, according to insiders, he's reportedly sitting face-to-face with federal agents, dropping names like it's his way out. And it's not just vague talk either. The reports claim Combs didn't hold back. He allegedly pointed directly at Snoop, sharing private details about deals, their relationship, and things that were never meant to come out in public. That's serious, because when information like that surfaces, it leaves only a couple of options. Someone isn't telling the truth, or someone is trying to cover something up. And right now, Combs is reportedly putting everything on the line, betting his freedom that federal agents will believe him over Snoop. Now here's where it starts to crack open even more. The official side of this story is starting to surface, and the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department has already spoken on it, and they've made their position very clear. Here's where things get even more confusing, and honestly, harder to ignore.
You get to be the age that we at, and you get to become as successful as we are, you have to start doing some things that matter for the future.
The official position from the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department is crystal clear. Sean Combs has never been considered a suspect in the Shakur homicide investigation. No gray area, no mixed wording. That's a direct, signed-off statement from the agency that actually handled the case. But then comes the part that raises eyebrows fast. The same case file that supposedly does not link Combs to the crime still mentions his name 77 times. That's not a small detail you can just brush off. Those references come from a July 2024 court filing tied to Keefe D, the only person ever arrested in connection to Shakur's case. And inside that filing are old police interviews where Keefe D told detectives that Combs was involved, that he was afraid of Suge Knight, and even claimed that Combs wanted Knight gone. Now think about that for a second. You've got an official denial on one side and documented statements pointing in a completely different direction on the other. Both of those things exist at the same time, and that's where the story starts to feel like it's splitting in two. So what does that leave us with? Either the police statement is missing key context that could make Combs look worse. Combs is behind bars right now, pushing claims about information he doesn't actually have. Neither of these outcomes looks clean, not even a little. No matter how you spin it, it raises serious questions, especially about the FBI reportedly leaning on him as a source. Because according to insiders, the federal investigation involving Snoop Dogg and Suge Knight is still active. Agents are asking questions. The file is said to be open, and the wild part is this: Combs is reportedly the one feeding them information. So if Las Vegas police are firm that he was never a suspect, then why is the FBI treating him like a key witness? Now the timing starts to look even stranger. Combs has already served about 19 months out of his 50-month sentence. His projected release date is April 15th, 2028. But that date is not set in stone. His appeal is already sitting in front of appellate judges in New York, with his legal team pushing that First Amendment argument hard. And no matter how unlikely it may sound, the fact that it's being reviewed means there's a real chance he could walk early on a technicality. Prosecutors have called the argument meritless. But let's be real, arguments labeled that way still win sometimes. And if that appeal doesn't work out, there's reportedly a backup plan in motion. The cooperation angle could be his way out. He doesn't necessarily need a courtroom victory. He just needs federal agents to believe that he knows more about what happened to Shakur than anyone else who's still alive. This is the real race now. How does this end? Does he walk free because a judge accepts that legal argument? Or does he walk because he traded information on Snoop Dogg and Suge Knight to federal agents who've been trying to close this case for nearly 30 years? That's the question hanging over everything right now. And there's another detail here that makes the whole situation feel even deeper than it looks. Right around the same time insiders started saying Combs was cooperating with the FBI, Snoop Dogg came out with a response. But it didn't land like a clear denial. At the same time, Suge Knight was already making noise, accusing Snoop of trying to help Keefe D get bail, even suggesting Snoop was nervous about being tied to Shakur's passing. Snoop didn't stay quiet. He fired back fast. He called Knight obsessed, said Knight was upset because Snoop now owns Death Row Records, and then he dropped a line that stands out in a big way. He said, "I realize you realize." Not "you're lying," not "that never happened," but "I realize you lies." That wording hits different. It doesn't sound like a simple denial. It sounds like someone reacting to something that's been building behind the scenes for a long time. Now look at what's happening on the other side of all this, because it's not quiet at all. The Shakur family isn't sitting back waiting for the FBI to figure things out. They've taken action and brought in serious legal power, Alex Spiro and Christopher K. Clore, to investigate Combs directly. And they're not digging around lightly either. They're going straight into old allegations that Combs may have offered money tied to Shakur's situation. That's a heavy claim. And they've already said it publicly. If they find solid evidence, they are ready to push for criminal charges. No hesitation. So now you've got 3 different tracks moving at the same time, and none of them are lining up. There's the federal investigation reportedly looking at Snoop Dogg and Suge Knight based on what Combs is saying. Then there's the Shakur family's investigation aiming directly at Combs himself. And on top of that, Combs is fighting his own battle, trying to get out of prison through an appeal or by cooperating. All of this is pulling in different directions, creating total confusion. And in the middle of that chaos, there's one person who stands to gain the most. The one behind bars, controlling what gets said, who hears it, and when it drops. You have to stop and ask the obvious question: why Snoop? Out of everyone Combs could reportedly point to, why choose the one figure who spent decades building a reputation as hip-hop's beloved uncle? That choice doesn't feel random at all. And the answer people keep circling back to isn't pretty. Either Combs knows something real, something serious enough to shake everything up, or he's willing to say he knows something. Because when your freedom is on the line between truth and a convincing story can start to blur fast. That's the uncomfortable reality. Right now, with his appeal still pending and this reported cooperation deal in play, Combs doesn't need to win over the public. That's not the goal. He only needs to sound believable to the FBI. And the FBI doesn't move like the public does. They don't confirm rumors, they don't shut down whispers, and they definitely don't step in just to protect reputations. So when insiders keep mentioning the same names, Snoop Dogg and Suge Knight, it lands differently. Because those names don't just pop up for no reason, especially when everything else is happening behind closed doors. Once something gets tied to a federal investigation, it usually means moves are already being made behind closed doors. That's what makes this so intense right now. The big question is, what exactly did Combs tell them? Was it something about the night of the shooting, private conversations that were never supposed to happen, details about who knew what and when? Or is this all a desperate play from a convicted man willing to say anything, point at anyone, just to avoid finishing his sentence? Here's what we actually know, and it doesn't line up clean at all. Las Vegas police have clearly said Combs was never a suspect, but his name still shows up in the case file 77 times. At the same time, the FBI is reportedly looking into Snoop Dogg and Suge Knight, and the twist is that Combs is said to be the one giving them that information. That's not a simple story. It's a complicated one, full of gaps and tension. And instead of clearing up, it just keeps getting bigger and harder to ignore. So where does all of this leave things right now? If Combs ends up walking free while the FBI continues circling around Snoop Dogg and Suge Knight, the public may never actually find out what was said behind those closed doors. That information doesn't just get released, it gets locked away. Deals get sealed, statements stay buried in files, and whatever was said could stay hidden for years. And that's where the real pressure starts to build. Because it's not just about whether Combs gets out, it's about what happens to everyone else if he does. Imagine that situation. A convicted informant walks free, while two other major names are left dealing with the fallout, trying to explain why fingers were pointed at them in the first place. That kind of shadow doesn't disappear easily. Right now, nobody involved looks comfortable, and nobody looks completely clear of questions. And the one person who seems to be moving with a plan is the one sitting in a prison cell, reportedly deciding what information to share and who it impacts next. Now shift the focus to the man whose statements helped spark all of this. Keefe D. He's the only person ever charged in the shooting. The same man whose past police interviews put Combs' name in the case file 77 times. And now, sitting in a Las Vegas jail cell, he's admitted that he lied for money. That changes everything and makes the truth even harder to pin down. He's now saying he never even read his own memoir. According to him, he just handed over stories and the author took off with them. And it gets worse. He claims he made the whole thing up for fame and money. That's a huge shift. So if the original source connecting Combs to Shakur's passing is openly admitting to lying, then what is the reported FBI focus on Snoop Dogg and Suge Knight actually built on? You can't build something solid on a shaky foundation and expect it not to fall apart. And that's exactly what this is starting to look like. Here's where it really gets confusing. Keefe D has told so many different versions of events over the years that it's almost impossible to track. In one interview, he says he was in the car. Then in another, he says he wasn't. One time, he claims he supplied the weapon, and later he downplays it, saying he was just a passenger. It doesn't stop there. Back in 2009, he told police that Combs was afraid of Suge Knight and wanted him gone. Then later, on a podcast, he flipped again, saying he wished he had never even met Combs. Now, his own lawyer is stepping into court saying there's no physical evidence tying him to the crime at all, just his words. And when the words keep changing like that, everything starts to feel unstable. These are words that kept changing, stories that were sold off to book publishers and documentary producers, shifting depending on the moment. And yet, the prosecution is still pushing forward toward a trial set for August 2026, leaning on those same inconsistent claims. That doesn't feel like a solid case. It starts to look more like a performance. Now add what's happening behind the scenes because this is where it gets even more intense. D's defense team is reportedly considering calling Combs as a witness. Think about how wild that is. The same man Keefe D once pointed at could now be brought into court to tear that story apart. If that happens, everything flips. Combs could take the stand and say Keefe D made it all up, calling him out directly as unreliable. And if a convicted man, with his own reasons to distance himself from the situation, says those confessions were just a money move, that could seriously influence how a jury sees the entire case. So now you've got this twist. Combs, who reportedly wants federal agents to trust what he's saying about Snoop Dogg and Suge Knight, could also end up helping Keefe D walk free. That's not just messy, it looks calculated. And when both paths somehow benefit the same person, it starts to feel less like coincidence and more like strategy. You have to pay close attention to how Snoop Dogg has been reacting, because his response is raising eyebrows. When Suge Knight accused him of trying to help Keefe D get bail, basically suggesting Snoop was worried about being linked to the situation, Snoop didn't come out with a simple, direct denial. Instead, he went after Knight personally. He called him obsessed and said the real issue was bitterness, pointing out that he now owns Death Row Records. That's a sharp response. But then came the line that really sticks. He said, "I realize you realize." Not "you're lying," not "that never happened," but "I realize you realize." That wording stands out in a big way. It sounds less like a straightforward denial and more like someone reacting to something deeper. The kind of response that feels like it's coming from someone who's been watching a situation unfold behind the scenes, waiting for it to surface. Because usually, a clear denial is simple. But this sounds more like someone trying to manage the narrative before it fully explodes into public view. Suge Knight is speaking from a California prison, serving a 28-year sentence, and he's been pointing fingers at Combs for nearly 3 decades. He was there that night, sitting behind the wheel, making him one of the only living witnesses to the shooting. He even took a bullet fragment to the head, but despite that, his credibility has taken so many hits over the years that a lot of people stopped taking him seriously a long time ago. And it's not hard to see why. He's made some wild claims, like saying Shakur's friends rolled his ashes into a blunt, or that his own mother helped end his life, or even that Prince intentionally seated him near Combs at a hotel event just to watch tension build between them. Now, maybe there are pieces of truth buried in some of that, but a lot of it sounds hard to believe. And here's where the situation flips in a way that feels almost unreal. If the FBI is now reportedly looking into Suge Knight based on what Combs is saying, then everything gets turned upside down. The man who spent years accusing Combs suddenly becomes the one under scrutiny. That's the kind of twist that changes the entire narrative. The accuser becomes the accused. And this situation doesn't stop there. It keeps spreading, pulling in more names and more uncertainty the deeper you look into it. The Shakur family is not relying on the federal system. They're running their own investigation, and they're moving with purpose. They brought in serious legal names, Alex Spiro and Christopher Clore, to go straight at Combs themselves. And they're not being subtle about it either. They're digging into long-standing allegations that Combs may have offered money tied to Shakur's situation. That's a major claim, and they've already made it clear if they uncover real evidence, they are prepared to push for criminal charges without hesitation. So now look at the full picture, because it's getting complicated fast. On one side, the FBI is reportedly treating Combs like an informant, using what he says to look into Snoop Dogg and Suge Knight. On another side, the Shakur family is zeroing in on Combs as a potential target. And right in the middle of all this, Combs is fighting his own battles. An appeal that could get him out early and a reported cooperation deal that could move things even faster if that appeal falls through. That's 3 separate tracks, all moving in different directions at once. And the only person who knows exactly what information is being shared, where it's going, and how it's being used is the one sitting in that federal prison cell. Now add another layer to this, and it's massive. There's a civil avalanche building with more than 70 lawsuits and over 120 accusers, all represented by the same Texas attorney, Tony Busby. That's not a handful of claims. That's a flood of accusations coming in all at once. Even though Combs was cleared of the most serious federal charges, the ones that could have kept him locked away for life, he's still a convicted felon. That part is not up for debate. The Mann Act conviction stands, and so does the 50-month sentence he's serving right now. But here's where things start to feel unstable again. His legal team is already pushing an appeal, arguing that the entire case should be thrown out under First Amendment protection. That's a bold move. And if that argument somehow works, he could walk free on a technicality. And if it doesn't, there's still that reported backup plan in play. The cooperation deal could be his second route out. Either way, he's not relying on just one path. And that's what keeps this whole situation on edge. Either way, those civil cases aren't slowing down. They keep stacking up. And if history is any guide, most of them will likely end in settlements. That's how these things usually go, which means Combs might never have to stand in front of a jury for the majority of these claims. So what does that leave as the real consequence? The man at the center of all this has two clear exits: an appeal that could cut his sentence short, or a deal that could open the door even faster. And that deal reportedly depends on him giving the FBI something they want. And right now, that something is said to involve Snoop Dogg and Suge Knight. But here's the part that really stands out. It's not about hard evidence. No weapon, no recorded confession, just his word. And the FBI doesn't even have to file charges for that to matter. If the investigation stays active long enough, that alone could be enough for Combs to benefit. After that, what happens next almost doesn't even change the impact. Because once those names are tied to an investigation, the damage is already out there. The suspicion sticks. And while Combs could be moving on with his life, everyone else could be left dealing with the fallout, trying to explain why a convicted informant pointed straight at them. Think about how uneven this really is. Snoop built his entire later career on being approachable, staying out of drama, and reshaping his image into something positive, even taking control of Death Row Records as a way to honor the culture, not dominate it. And now, just because a convicted felon reportedly pointed a finger at him, he could end up stuck under a federal spotlight for years. And here's the part that hits hard. No charges are even needed. No indictment, no courtroom battle. Just the idea of an investigation can shift how people look at you. That alone can change everything. Suge Knight is already behind bars, so his situation is different, but not better. Adding a federal investigation on top of his current sentence only makes things look worse for him. It feeds into the image people already had, painting him as the mastermind many believed he was. And even if nothing ever comes from it, that mark doesn't just disappear. The suspicion sticks around. And in the middle of all that, Combs could be the one who walks away from it all. Let's bring this back to the center, because the more you zoom out, the more one question keeps coming back. How does Combs have information about Shakur's passing that anyone would consider credible? If he was never a suspect and has always denied knowing anything, then none of these new layers actually answer that. They just make the situation messier. Now look at everything stacked together. Keefe D is saying he lied. The FBI is still reportedly listening to Combs anyway. Snoop Dogg is denying it all, but in a way that feels like he saw this moment coming. Suge Knight is speaking out from prison, while at the same time possibly becoming a target himself. And then you've got the Shakur family running their own investigation, treating Combs like the central figure they need to look into. All of these pieces are moving at once, and instead of clearing things up, they're making everything feel even more complicated. And now, everything circles back to the one thing nobody can clearly answer. What does Combs actually know, and where did it come from? Because at this point, it's not just about claims anymore, it's about credibility. If his information is strong enough to matter to federal agents, then it had to come from somewhere real, or at least sound real enough to be taken seriously. But that's where the tension keeps building, because nothing in this situation lines up clean. You've got shifting stories, public denials, old accusations, and new investigations, all colliding at the same time. And in the middle of it, the truth feels harder to reach than ever. What makes this even more intense is that the public may never get a straight answer. If deals are made behind closed doors, if statements stay sealed, then whatever Combs is saying could stay locked away for good. And that leaves everyone else dealing with the fallout of something they can't fully see or challenge. So the real question isn't just who's telling the truth, it's who benefits the most from the confusion. Because right now, the only thing that's clear is this: While everyone else is reacting, one person might already be several steps ahead. More than 70 lawsuits are closing in around him like a storm that just won't clear. And still, none of it solves the core problem. It only exposes how much of this system runs on deals instead of straight truth. Because at this point, Combs doesn't actually have to prove anything. He just has to stay useful. And right now, he's reportedly making himself very useful. So maybe the real question isn't whether he walks free anymore. Maybe that part is already in motion. The real question is, who takes the hit when he does? Does the FBI actually bring charges, or does everything quietly fade once he's out the door? And what about Snoop? Do you believe his denial, or do you think Combs is sitting on something real? This story is far from over, and every new detail just makes it deeper. Drop your thoughts in the comments because this one is only getting bigger. And if you want more breakdowns like this, make sure you like, subscribe, and share so you don't miss what comes next.